Jacob is director of the Traveler program at Reachworld, a New York-based global education nonprofit organization. So in this workshop, Tim will be mainly talking about how we can effectively share our research with different audiences. So that is a vital skill for researchers looking to broaden their impact and impact of the work. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tim.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for staying up so late too to introduce me. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Yeah, no worries.
Very happy to be here with you all. Thank you so much to Susan, Simone, Emily, everyone at IGAC for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Tim Jacob. I am the director of the Traveler and Explorer programs at Reach the World, like Susan said. My work is every day at the intersection of cutting edge scientific research and school children, so really young children. I work in the science communication sort of in between space, helping really complex and interesting field work be accessible to young people. Today I'm going to talk about science communication and telling the story of your work generally. I know not all of you, it doesn't make sense for all of you to communicate with really young students. For some people, it has a lot of benefits, but I'm going to talk about this work pretty generally. And then I'm going to go over a resource that I've developed that helps especially early career scientists think about how they might want to tell the story of their work. And then we can do some questions and answers at the end. So I'm going to share my presentation in just a moment. And get started. If you have any questions along the way, did that work? I don't think so. It didn't. I'm not seeing it on my screen. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to just collect them in the chat and we can answer them at the end. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about education and outreach planning today. I use the word expedition here. I want you to know that if you're not going to northern Alaska to collect data like our atmospheric scientist researcher in this picture, Jesse, is doing, that's okay. You don't need to be on a traditional expedition to I think form connections with what I'm saying today. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're doing it, in the field, in a lab, wherever it's happening, education outreach should be something that you're thinking about for a lot of good reasons. I know that right now in particular in the United States and elsewhere, there's a big emphasis on explaining the benefits of your work to society at large, to the people who fund research, so that people understand what you're doing, they understand the value of it, and the people who are making decisions about where funding goes can have accessibility to your work and will want to fund it. My connection to all of this, I am not a scientist. I know almost nothing about global atmospheric chemistry, but I'm really interested in all the different kinds of fieldwork and science that are happening around the world. I apply my teaching background to translating and helping people who are extremely knowledgeable about certain topics to share it with other groups. I was the onboard expedition outreach education officer for the Endurance 22 expedition that located Ernest Shackleton's ship off the coast of Antarctica a couple of years ago. Had a big science team on the expedition, but the primary objective was finding this historic shipwreck. So I got to use a lot of the tools that I preach about and practice from this expedition ship in Antarctica. So if I can do this from Antarctica, I argue that you can use a lot of the same things that I've been working on to share your work from wherever you are. Generally speaking, the state of education outreach today is very interesting. The digital world plays a big role in this, as you can imagine. Everything, the way that people are able to communicate their work from wherever they are is increasingly digital. That is the way, unless you have a film deal, you have like a documentary film, following you around, which is pretty rare. The digital tools at our disposal are very, very useful and very low cost. They give a lot of opportunity to do live and experiential exposure to your work. So whatever it is you're doing, you have a chance to really show people what you're doing. Oftentimes, I come from a writing background, so the mantra of writers is always show, don't tell. And it's especially true of field work and research, that being able to show people, engage them in a live and experiential experience around your work is a great way to help them understand what you're doing. Um, when you are Another strong connection to writing is that when you decide who it is you want to be the audience of your work, whether you are communicating to policymakers, funders, general adults, or teenagers, or little kids, your audience is going to dictate the medium that you use to communicate. For example, if I really wanted to do a social media storytelling program about my work, I probably would not use, I wouldn't use like Twitter if I wanted to reach school kids, because Twitter, or X, I guess, is not usable. Social media is not used in formal classrooms. So that's one example of how the medium would be dictated by the audience I was trying to reach. The good news about all of this is that it used to be really, really expensive to connect with people from distant places, or to connect, just generally through satellite communications and other tools. But now it's fairly low cost relative to what it has been recently. So you don't have to budget a lot of money to do a very effective education and outreach initiative for your work. The pandemic, especially in the United States, has really accelerated technology adoption in US schools. So if you are leaning into digital storytelling around your work, the good news is that classrooms, and certainly individuals, we all have a phone in our pocket, have easy access to the technology-based storytelling that you are producing. And overall, and this is a very positive thing, it gets me excited every day to find the new ways to do this. Because of all of this access, because of all of this technology, because of the low cost, there are so many possibilities. There really is no one right or wrong way. I'm going to talk today about some of the ways that you can do storytelling, do education and outreach programs, but it is certainly not an exhaustive list. I see every day really creative ways that people are using new tools, new ideas to share their research with others. I love this work. Well, first of all, I should say not every scientist loves education and outreach. Some people think of it as something they have to do to get funding. Some people think of it as a distraction or like a side quest from the really important, significant data you're collecting and the science that you're doing. But I want to try to share my enthusiasm with you for this. I think everyone who's here today understands the value of it and is maybe trying to do more of it. But for any naysayers in the audience, I want to tell you why education and outreach is really special and can be really, really fun. You all in your work should, I hope, consider yourself as explorers. That's a very loaded word for me. Explorers are people who are really curious, who are really resilient, who don't take no for an answer, who are always looking for other ways to think about or support or investigate questions that are on your mind. So you bring something to your work that we in the education and outreach world think of as the explorer's mindset. That explorer's mindset is a really, really interesting way of thinking about the world. not everybody has the explorer's mindset. Some people are very happy not knowing, what's around the corner, what the answer to this and this and this question are. Your explorer's mindset is a huge asset to you when it comes to education and outreach, because as much as you're teaching about atmospheric chemistry, you're also teaching a way of thinking about the world when you communicate with other audiences. You, in the course of your work, get to see and do things that most people can only dream of. And on this call alone, we have people on almost every continent, moving around the world in a very fluid, comfortable way. You're going to other countries, you're interacting with people from other cultures and places. And don't underestimate the value of that, because there's a lot of value. There's a lot of storytelling. There's a lot of really positive message in that before we even get to the nuances of your atmospheric chemistry projects. This community also has a really strong tradition of storytelling, in that explorers everywhere love to tell stories. They love to tell about how something went totally wrong on, some expedition or some field work that you had planned, or that, everything that happens, is usually high stakes, is usually dramatic, is like, produce some finding that you totally weren't expecting. That storytelling is what, just at an essential level, really hooks people into you and your story and the work that you're doing. Um, and then, like I said, people on this call alone and within your great organization are from lots and lots of different countries. And the challenges that we are facing as a globe are global issues. Atmospheric chemistry is a global issue. It doesn't stop at one border and like not continue across the border into somebody else's airspace. So global citizenship, the ability to work together with people from other countries and cultures, to understand different perspectives. All of these things are embedded in education and outreach, in addition to the hard science that you are communicating. So when you think about education and outreach, don't think about it exclusively as um, I want people to understand the specific scientific question that I am attempting to answer. There are all sorts of layers of nuance underneath and around that core principle. Finally, we want people to become scientists. We need more scientists. We need more people collecting data and helping us tackle, solve, gain insight into these big challenges facing the Earth. So you are global role models. Your story personally is really, really important to your education and outreach plan. There are so many ways that education and outreach can look like. I've listed a bunch of them here. I'm not going to read them off, but this, as again, is not an exhaustive list of the ways that you can engage. Most people have one or two ways that they feel comfortable communicating. If you are a big social media person, social media can be great. It's got its positives and its negatives in terms of storytelling potential. If you are someone who just like would rather talk about what you do instead of write about it, because maybe you're more comfortable writing for sort of academic journals, and when the chance to write for younger audiences comes up, you're like not as comfortable writing for young kids, for example, you need to be on camera. You need to be like sharing your experiences live, speaking with people, because that sort of leans to your strengths as a storyteller. Um, there are lots and lots of ways to do this. You are familiar, I'm sure, with everything on this list. Some things are a little bit more complicated, like virtual exchange. It's what Reach the World does, what we specialize in. But some things can take way less time. Some things take more time. Um, we'll get into this list a little bit more after I'm finished with these next couple of slides, because my worksheet, your planning worksheet, that I wanted to share with you goes into the positives and negatives from my perspective of all of these approaches, and can help you maybe figure out which one of these might be right for you, or which combination of these might be right for you. Um, choosing the best one is half the battle. Choosing how you're going to perform education and outreach around your work is a big determinator for whether you're successful or not. These are the things that I think you really need to be thinking about. Your story is unique. Your story involves you. You are a central character in your story. So, how you want to tell your story should be very, very personal. Some people really prefer to be behind the camera, let the work speak for itself. But when we engage with media, when we engage with people in our lives and around the world who we find really interesting and want to learn more from, I think you'll reflect and find that it's something about the person that draws you in. It's the way they speak, it's their energy, it's their enthusiasm about what they're doing that maybe you don't understand right away, um, the nuances of their work, but you really like the vibe that they're putting off. You really like you're like curious to see why someone would be so excited about something they're doing, and that draws you in. So, how you want to tell your story will dictate in some ways what the best education and outreach option is for you. Also, who do you want to reach? Do you want to reach governments and policymakers? Do you want to reach the youngest of young students so that early on in their lives they have role models who are working in global chemistry, atmospheric chemistry, and they can grow up thinking, well, I should and could do that too because I'm interested in some of these same questions. Um, where you're based will affect your connectivity. If you are in the middle of, a rainforest or Antarctica, like I know people in this group work in those spaces, what's your connectivity going to be like? The great news is, and I can attest to this, there's almost nowhere in this world where you won't be able to connect digitally to wider audiences if you desire to do that. There are so many great tools. We can get into that a little bit more in a couple minutes, but think about your connectivity. If you're going to be truly offline, when you're deep in, a jungle or you're wherever you're doing your work, or you're in a lab where you can't really show for, privacy reasons or security reasons, you can't really show what you're doing, that's going to affect how you connect with your audience. It's going to be a factor. Um, Also, and there's such a wide range of work in this group, think about what makes your work and where you're doing it unique. Like really reflect on that, because sometimes you take the next step and you do it and you've been doing it for many years, especially if you're later in your career. And I know a lot of the people in this group are early career scientists, so maybe you're in the first 5 to 10 years of your work. Um, People who have been doing unique things like this start to forget how unique aspects of it are. If you are on a ship-based data collecting expedition, living and working on a ship is not something most people do. Like that is part of your story before you even talk about the data you're collecting. That's a really unique experience that's part of your fieldwork, a part of your research that you will want to think about when you are deciding what the best education and outreach option is for you. um, you can kind of look at this on a sliding scale of whether you want to teach a lot of people a little bit about your work or a few people a lot about your work. It's kind of a sliding scale. So what kind of impact do you want? Do you want a lot of people to understand just a little bit about your work? That will dictate what option you choose. If you want a few people to really go on a journey with you, to really understand all aspects of your work, because they need to understand lots of complex layers of your work in order to really like get it or become engaged as long-term sort of shareholders in your research, then you're going to need to dive deep. You're going to need to, focus on a more niche audience and really craft an education outreach experience that is, um, you know, custom made for a deeper dive with those people. Um, some people are really good at capturing media around their work. Some people are, not naturally inclined to like pause and have someone take a picture of them while they're doing, X, Y, or Z task. Um, be realistic about your access to media. Do you have, a colleague or a friend, or maybe even yourself, who really, really likes to take short videos, or really, really likes to edit video, or really likes to, is very aware that when something is happening in your shared research experience, like this photo can literally be worth 1,000 words. So sometimes, and I've had this experience myself where I've been working with a scientific team, or I've been in the middle of something and I'm really engaged, I'm really like focused on the work that's being done. And, a day or 2 days or a week or a year afterwards, I think, oh, I wish someone had taken a photo of that, because, that media would have really helped me show people why that was such a cool experience. Um, Education and outreach is a multimedia experience. It doesn't mean you need to create like a IMAX 3D. You're not a filmmaker, most likely. So you don't need to think about it on that scale, but having photos and having short videos and the collection of media is very, very important for storytelling. And finally, it's always sort of question about how much budget do I need to set aside from my grants, from my funding for my project, to really do an effective job of telling my story, of my expedition or my fieldwork story. Budget, as I said on an earlier slide, is sort of going down and down and down. You do not need to have a documentary film crew following you in order to tell the story of your work. That's very unrealistic for most people. So you don't need a huge budget to do really, really effective education and outreach work. And I can talk a little bit more about that at the end. For early career scientists, I cannot emphasize enough how many positive outcomes will come to you from really focusing on education and outreach and learning the skills you need to be good at education and outreach early in your career. We all have worked with, more senior, like super veteran scientists who are absolute world leaders in their field and could not communicate the nuances of their brilliance to save their life to a non-scientific audience. I work with people like that every day, where the challenge is taking people who are extremely knowledgeable in their fields and trying to help them translate what they're doing to make it accessible to non-scientific audiences. And you, as an early career scientist, that any time you take to invest in building your skill set as an education and outreach, person, will help you in your scientific career, because this is increasingly essential to getting funding, to all the benefits that come from telling your story. So, short list of skills that you get from really taking the time to do this. And by being on this or listening to this recording or being here live today, I think is a great start. Digital storytelling skills, essential. Improved scientific communication skills, essential. Representing yourself, your country, your perspectives in front of different audiences, essential for especially the next generation of scientists who are coming up behind you. Um, when you do this really well, you're not only creating, a live sort of experience for people who are interested in learning about your work, but you're creating or learning how to create resources that live on long after, the active data collection, or long after the project that you're working on right now, to have benefit to others and help explain this work to others long after you've moved on to something else. I have seen firsthand that very effective education and outreach folks embedded within expeditions makes them much more competitive for grants. It's fun to see that is something that is really valued as a skill on a scientific team, especially. And I can't emphasize enough how great it feels when you have successfully communicated the brilliance of the work that you're doing to a non-scientific audience. It just it is such a feeling of like they understand it. You know, when you're getting questions that are incorporating aspects of your work and they're coming back to you, even like I say this from young kids to adults. We've all, you know, have people in our lives who are like, well, what is it you're actually doing again? Or like what is this work that you're doing? You know, it's very easy to sort of write off high-level scientific research as inaccessible to the general public, but there are these ways and tools of making that very accessible so that people can understand what you're doing and ask great questions and have more informed conversations about your work, and it feels wonderful. This picture the pictures on this slide are from a program that we did with a researcher who was investigating human-wildlife conflict in Kenya. And she chose a couple different ways to communicate with school kids, you know, through some written articles that they could use in their classroom, as well as live stream events from Kenya. When I talk about like trying to identify the unique aspects of your work, this was, you know, in the school day. This video call was from the school day in the United States. But Lynn, the researcher, was in Kenya. So when she joined, it was nighttime and she was, you know, in a remote area of Kenya, and she was sort of lit by the glow of her computer. And it was attracting all the sort of flies and things that come out at night in Kenya. And it was very unique for the kids. It's a small thing, but an interesting thing that, you know, all these things were flying between her face and the camera because they're attracted to the light of the computer. And it really helped the kids understand that Lynn was not in the United States. Lynn was in Kenya, and that, you know, she was not, she was joining us from far away because it's nighttime there and it's daytime here. These foundational sort of aspects of your work, especially with young kids, maybe we don't think about, maybe we think of as just like a technical hurdle to overcome when it's setting up a live stream event or something like that, but they are very educational and beneficial to people who are not living your life as a researcher. The final thing I sort of want to say in an organized way is that it's always worth it when you're considering your audience to try to reach audiences that are not easily reached by your work. And I say that as, you know, within the scientific community, you know, there are science-based schools. There are, you know, people who naturally gravitate towards science-related stories. And when you create something that has storytelling at its roots, those people will naturally flock to it. Those are the people who, you know, want to learn more. They're already maybe more advanced on that road of the explorer's mindset. Any efforts you can do to reach out to audiences that would not typically come across your stories are all worth it, because together and through this act of education and outreach, we need more people to understand what you are doing. We just need people to understand what you're doing and to understand the value of what you're doing and the impact it has on their lives. So expanding the access, expanding the group of people who are connecting with you, learning from you, is a really important extra step that you can take in addition to planning an effective program. So I'm going to stop right there. And I know the PDF of my planning worksheet was shared with you ahead of time. I want to take
No, Tim, I did not share it with
Okay.
anybody. So
All right, no worries. Good.
This
Then it will
is-
be surprise. It'll be new and exciting to you. This is where, you know, I've spoken in sort of general terms about what you should be thinking about, what you can consider about education and outreach. This is where as we say, the rubber hits the road, like where the details take shape for you and your specific set of circumstances. The front side of this sheet, which you'll each get a copy of, you can use as sort of a planning worksheet as you're thinking about what you might like to do with education and outreach. It just includes a bunch of questions that you can think about and reflect for yourself. I oftentimes come across science that I think is very straightforward. And I say that from a non-scientist perspective. When someone says to me what they're doing, I say, oh, I get it. Great. Like, this is a simple story. I would guess that many of you and your work falls more in it's a complex story. People don't know what aerosols are. People don't know how you collect data about the atmosphere. You know, it's a mystery to so many people, and telling people the complexity of your work involves identifying that it's a complex story is the first step to breaking it down into smaller chunks that build up to the point where after a short while, people understand the complexity because they understand the simplified components that build up to the more complex concept. So just knowing whether your story is simple or complex is a great place to start. One of the biggest mistakes I often see when I deal with scientists who are trying to do education and outreach is that they want to tell their story to everybody, that it's a general audience story. And that's fine, but when you decide that, when you narrow the scope of that audience a little bit, when you decide, okay, I really want to focus on, connecting with high school students in Germany, or I really want to focus on, lawmakers in, Australia because they're the ones who are going to impact my funding, or I really want to focus on K through 12 students, like young students in the United States, maybe in the East Coast of the United States. When you have a more defined audience, it will help you pick the right tools. It will help you pick the right sort of storytelling approach, and it will certainly impact the narrative of your story, how you present yourself. Another thing I often hear from scientists that we work with who are thinking about E&O is that when you have a chance to go into the field to collect data, or you're in the lab and you're processing data, or you're in the sort of throes of your work, that it's a very time-consuming process. And people say, I don't know if I'm going to have time for this. And that's a totally valid concern. You just have to be really aware of all right, so how much availability do I have to do? This is something I would like to do, but am I going to be available to write articles for school children while I'm in, this 3-week period where I'm in the field and I have a limited time to collect all this data that's essential for my research? Probably not. We need to find a different entry point because it's just logistically not going to happen. You need to be focused on your data collection. It's not the best way for you to do education and outreach if you're not available to accommodate it. Connectivity we've already covered. If you're curious, if you don't think connectivity is something that is for you or is available to you in your location, there are a lot of ways to work around that. I'm not implying that you need to be on the internet connecting live with people and that's the only way to do education and outreach. There are many, many ways to not do internet-based education and outreach. You just have to identify that that is or isn't something that's available to you or something you want to do. When you go places, when you travel the world, when you are doing your research, you will be thinking hopefully about all of the really unique aspects of your work, all of the things that maybe you take for granted that that other people might be interested in, especially when you have a defined audience. Kids, even though that you are atmospheric chemists, maybe you're someplace where in the course of your field work or in the course of your data collection, you are encountering interesting animals. And maybe your first instinct is like, well, these animals are like interesting and cool, and we have to think about how to avoid them, you know, as we're collecting our data. That is part of your story, especially if you are communicating with young kids. Your audience and your access to unique experiences will inform the narrative around the delving into of your actual research, because all of those components inform kids' understanding of where you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. I talked a little bit already about desired impact, whether you'd like a lot of people to know a little about your expedition, a smaller group to know a lot about your expedition, or something in between. I'll give social media as an example of a lot of people knowing a little about what you're doing. Many people love social media. I guess many people hate social media too, but if you are inclined towards social media, you have a limited word count, you have a limited sort of ability to just focus on one small 7-second aspect of your work. And if you can take a complex topic and break it into small pieces that all fit within, you know, whatever the time limitation of a short video that holds the social media audience's attention, if you can do that, social media is a great option for you because you have a huge audience at your fingertips. But your audience will be general adults, probably people who are already interested in science. You're not necessarily breaking into new audiences by using social media. That's one of the downsides. We talked about media, collecting media, and we talked about budget. What funds would you have available to accomplish your education outreach objectives? Would adding a little bit more to an E&O budget help you reach the audience you're trying to reach? All important questions to consider. And finally, here's my sort of pros and cons of different methods that I brought up earlier in my talk. I have a blank bullet point for advantages and disadvantages for both, because I know there are things that I haven't necessarily thought of as advantages and disadvantages for all of these, but I started off sort of from my experience sharing the advantages and disadvantages of social media, doing a website or a blog, in-person presentations, always very popular after the fact, you know, presenting to audiences that want to hear the results of your work. Live stream events, virtual exchanges like Reach the World does, project-based learning with students, filmmaking, and there are certainly others. I hope that this sheet, which we'll share with you after I'm finished here, is something that you can use. Just take 5 minutes and like jot down the answers that are specific to you and your research and your desires around education and outreach. It helps to sort of frame what you want to do, how you want to do it, why you want to do it, and what you want the results to be, so that you can start to put together an individualized education outreach plan that really works for you and has a high chance of being successful. So with that, I know we have about 18 minutes left. I'm happy to take questions. If there are any, we can go really deep into some small aspect of what I said that might have caught your attention or raised the question, or discuss whatever is on your mind.
Thank you, Tim. That was very informative. I can see Max has a question already.
Sure. Hey, Max.
Hi, Tim. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It's very interesting. And I could reflect on some of the things you said about coming out of a field campaign in some amazing setting, being Antarctica or the Amazon rainforest, and not having enough pictures or videos and realizing you didn't plan for this. So I think it's something most of us have to think about it a bit more in advance when we know we're going to be put in a situation that is out of the ordinary. The question I had, multifaceted, I guess, is around the politics and our role as educators, particularly in the face of what's happening in some countries at the moment, where how do you deal with situations like what's currently going on right now in the US, where certain terms that we as atmospheric chemists work on, say climate or air quality, can lead to actually troubles? Do you keep going? Is it the advocacy or our role to actually fight back and educate the masses? And as well, I'm wondering, why is it that some of the work that we've done through decades say, you know, the ozone hole was one of the most successful education and outcome that we've done, atmospheric chemists, where the situation got fixed very quickly, yet people still don't really seem to understand what the ozone hole is, where it is, and how long does it last for every year, and whether or not it's closed. Then there's the issue of greenhouse gases that we very well understand it, and it's still not, like, for a very long time, people still did not believe us or trust us. Yet so many of us are working on this, and the education is not getting through. So I was wondering, how do you advocate the whole politics of education and outreach?
Sure. Yeah, no, I completely understand. I think a lot of the focus of this group's work falls into a category that has become controversial but shouldn't be. You know, it's like unnecessarily sort of burdened by political limitations, as you described. It comes down to like picking your audience, for me at least, because there are definitely schools that Reach the World works with where if we presented a education outreach program, they would not be able to use something that had climate change in the title. It's just a fact of formal education in the United States, which is sad. But I think that our role, my role, your role, is to keep going, is to keep, you know, talking about you, Max, your work, where you go, what you do, why you're doing it, why you feel it's important, to keep telling the story, because the policymakers are going to do what the policymakers are going to do in the United States. But I see it as my great responsibility to inform and educate the next generation of STEM professionals and researchers. And the best way to do that is to give them access to people like yourself who are on the front lines of these major issues and are approaching them from a very objective, scientific way. So when I understand your frustration about, like, you know, year after year, we have to keep telling the same message on issues that continue to be true about the ozone, about, you know, climate change, about all of these issues. Our educators' approach I can only really speak to K through 12 educators in the United States, but they have a lot of sort of pressures put on them by outside forces, right? They're not always the ones who are dictating what can or can't be used in their classroom. So the best that we can do as educators like myself or as a nonprofit are to continue to package this important storytelling in a way that it's reaching as many students as possible, and continue to partner with and work with and promote the voices of people who are in the field doing the important work, showing students who I find to be, you know, students are amazingly like receptive to ideas, to new people, and they are, you know, part of the generation that's going to have to deal with the impacts of climate change for sure. I mean, we all are, but I guess the short story is we should not stop. Absolutely not. We should not stop sharing these stories. And the best, most authentic way that I have seen it done is to, you know, not put out a formal program that says like climate change and you. It's about let's follow Max into the Amazon and let's see what Max is doing, because what Max is doing is really cool. And, you know, he feels passionately about finding answers to these complex problems in the world. And, you know, what can we learn from what Max is seeing and doing? And also, you know, the objective scientific conclusions that are coming from this data that he's collecting. Those things are not negotiable. Those are science. That's, you know, storytelling, science, human connection and relationships in a way that I think accomplishes the same goal of educating young people on these complex, important issues without really wading into these like muddy sort of traps of what you call something or what you don't call it, and whether or not that makes it acceptable in formal classrooms. And honestly, if the what you're doing is considered to be, you know, if what you're doing in the way that you would like to describe it is not usable by a formal K through 12 classroom in one small area of one country, that does not make it irrelevant or not less useful for students, classrooms, general public, adults, you know, lots of different shareholder groups in lots of other places until, you know, political tides change and we can do more, restrictions are lifted. So I would just say generally keep going, you know, like there are no more important issues to communicate. And it is the early career scientists, the younger generation that is it's important to keep telling these stories in a way that they can be used.
I know I can't be seen anymore because the lighting in my office is awful, but do we have any other questions?
Can I ask something? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask you actually about, like, you said the importance of keep going. I have some experience with local outreach in the middle of the Amazon, but when I'm not actually there, you know, they kind of do not have access to it anymore. So they highly depend on my presence over there. I don't know how is, like, I actually, I remember that we spoke a little bit about like the program that you have with the teachers, you know,
Right.
because at some point I have my doubts if the message is really clear, you know, if we do just like how can I say that, like random, you know, activities, and it's not something that has a follow-up or something like this, or that we don't know if there will be a follow-up. So how do we approach, you know, this in that sense? Because we understand that it's important to pass on the message, but how clear this is going to be and how useful this is going to be if there is no continuance or it's uncertain, you know, how things are.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the audience you're trying to connect and do your education work with are the folks who are in the Amazon, correct? It's not people outside the Amazon who you're helping to understand what life is like in the Amazon. Okay, great. So, but your ability to go there in person quite often is a huge not quite often, like occasionally.
Yeah, like it used to be quite often, not anymore. So that's the issue, you know. And I mean,
yes.
for us, yes, I'm just thinking about, because there is just, we are from all over the places, you know, and sometimes we do field works like at different places.
Yes.
And this is the life of usually a young researcher that does field work. Some people don't. But if we do field work and we have to, you know, it's important to actually approach the location that we are working with.
Sure.
So how can we do that in a constructive way that is not going to be disruptive, you know, that is not going to just put more doubts in their heads and or something like this?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer from my perspective is like any chance you get for in-person contact is super valuable, right? Like I know limitations to going into the field. When I think about education outreach, I think of these two like really big keywords in online learning, which are synchronous and asynchronous. You're going to have opportunities to have synchronous learning where you're either connecting live digitally. I understand there's connectivity issues in this use case, but also you're going to have asynchronous learning that takes place when you can't be together. And thinking about both of those components and how they work together is, I think, going to be the answer to this question. So in the rare occasion where you are in person, you have the opportunity to, you know, do direct teaching, do direct learning, do interactive, the sort of like live interactive things. Like if there's something that's really important for you, for your audience to understand. You have a chance to like share your enthusiasm, your energy, all of those things you get from being with people, or even, you know, being on camera with people like this. This is a synchronous learning activity. Make the most of that. And also in the planning process, you know, what is going to come after that, the asynchronous component, or what's going to happen between your synchronous in-person event and like there's a big gap of time, and then maybe you're planning to go back and see that group a year later, or, you know, 6 months later. How do you want that asynchronous period to be structured? Is there a project that group can work on and can use like the knowledge conferred or the topics discussed during your synchronous experience together, that they can apply that knowledge to an independent project that when you come back, then you can, you know, talk about, give feedback to, be an expert judge to, you know, like the in-between time is not a dormant period between two learning opportunities. It's a chance to put into practice, you know, add personal experiences to what you learned from the chance to interact with you live. We can talk more about other ways to do that, but like my first thought is that there's got to be a lot of structure to the in-between period so that it doesn't feel like a one-off chance to meet this really cool researcher who's doing cool things and be excited in the moment, but then 6 months go by and you're like, I feel like I met you this one time, and what did we talk about? It's really, really hard in 45 minutes or an hour or even a day to create a lasting legacy for your message. And what happens when you're not together is just as important as what happens when you're together, is my 3-minute answer.
Yeah, so basically planning ahead. That's something that we usually don't think about, you know, like Max said, sometimes we don't even have pictures of ourselves in the field, you know, because there's no time for it. Or I mean, a lot of things happen during field work. So we need to deal with the unexpected regarding the science. And the outreach, unfortunately, is not still, you know, in the same level of priority for a lot of, even for senior researchers sometimes. So it's something that we really need to learn about, at least, maybe thinking about it, you know, a little bit in advance, to prepare something beforehand, or maybe to talk to people. Because even like this, think about something that you can, live there, or something to like plan ahead to discuss like on next opportunity or something like that. Yeah, this needs to be planned ahead. Yeah.
If you can leave the framework for a longer lasting project, student-driven or teacher-driven project, that students can maybe, like, you teach them the basics of data collection, and then you go away for 6 months and the students collect data in the same way that you modeled for them, you know, maybe a simplified way, but the students are collecting their own data. They're seeing what it feels like to be, you know, perform field work akin to what you're doing. You come back, and then the next time you interact, you can show them like, well, what are we going to do with this data? You know, and they're invested in this longer term process that does not require you to be present the whole time. And the only other thing I'd say about your comment, which I think is absolutely true, is that the senior researchers who I come across are increasingly understanding the value of education and outreach. And it is a major, major area. I've already said this once, but it's worth repeating. It's a major, major area that early career scientists can add tremendous value to field work, because you are more technology savvy, you are more used to telling your individual story than some people further down the road, you know. We all collectively grew up, you know, telling our stories, being on camera, sharing these things, and it's something that comes more naturally to sort of, you know, I'm 45, so like I consider I'm like maybe on the up through 45, 50-ish, you know, we grew up with technology in our lives, and it's a skill that we have collectively that is very, very valuable to the field, not only for communicating to the public, but also for, you know, contributing to complex scientific work.
Yeah, I agree. I received several feedbacks, like from kids saying that, and even like teachers sharing that the kids were much more interested when different people were there sharing their own journey, you know, rather than sharing specifically the research or whatever. So sharing their own journey, the challenges, or yeah, the funny stories or these kind of things, because these would spark interest on them to actually think about following those steps or thinking about pursuing science as a career in the future, something like that. So this was very nice. Yeah.
Well, all of you have been successful in landing jobs in research. Like, great, good for you. Like, that is a field that can be intimidating to a lot of people. You know, everybody knows and assumes that you're very smart and very driven and very successful to get to where you've been in your career. And breaking down that inaccessibility to outside audiences is super important. I want to know if you have any pets and how you got to the Amazon and like what you're scared of when you go there and what you eat and all of these things that people don't immediately think of as important aspects of scientific storytelling. Help us understand and feel connected to you, so that when you say, well, the whole reason I go through all of this is to collect these numbers on this sheet. And everyone's like, what? Like, you went through all of that? Like, those numbers must be really, really important. Like, tell us why those numbers are important. And like, that is the level of engagement that I think we all want around our respective work. It's especially important when, you know, the work that you're doing is sometimes conducted in remote places. And if you didn't think about education and outreach, it would stop there. You know, the few people who are lucky enough to be on the expedition or in the lab doing this cutting edge work, you do not want the story to stop there. You want that story to go out to the people who need to hear it.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, does anyone have any more questions?
Doesn't seem like it.
I can barely see people, like my phone is kind of crazy here. So
Nobody has their hand up and there's no comments in the chat.
Okay.
So
well, you know, I might just add, like, as I said before, everybody's circumstances are different. I spoke in very broad terms today about things you can think about, things you should think about as you think about education and outreach. If you are watching this recording or like you had a question that is like really specific to your work, reach out to me anytime, please. Like, I'm happy to help solve this, whatever problem you might be facing. Like, you know, I can maybe add some more personalized advice from my experience for how you could approach this. I would love to see you all succeed in education and outreach, because I think it's critical to bridging the divide between science and the general public. So my email address is tim@reachtheworld.org. Please email me anytime. I'd be happy to sort of add on to or customize any experiences I have that might help you on your education and outreach journey.
thank you so much, Tim. If there's nobody else, then I will stop the recording and